The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had come, who had... I'm going to turn around because I can't. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you." As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulders along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot, for she said, "Do not let me look on the death of the child." And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy, and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife to him from the land of Egypt.
And now Simon is going to read our next reading, which is quite long, Psalm 86.
Supplication for help against enemies, a prayer of David. Incline your ear, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am devoted to you. Save your servant who trusts you. You are my God. Be gracious to me, O Lord. For you do I cry all day long. Gladden the soul of your servant, for to you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. For you, O Lord, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call on you. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Listen to my cry for supplication. In the day of my trouble, I call on you, for you will answer me. There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. All the nations you have made shall come and bow down before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name. For you are great and do wondrous things. You alone are God. Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Give me an undivided heart to revere your name. I give thanks to you, O Lord my God, with my whole heart, and I will glorify your name forever. For great is your steadfast love towards me. You have delivered my soul from the depths of Sheol. O God, the insolent rise up against me. A band of ruffians seeks my life, and they do not set you before them. But you, O Lord, are a God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Turn to me and be gracious to me. Give your strength to your servant. Save the child of your maidservant. Show me a sign of your favour, so that those who hate me may see it and be put to shame. For you, O Lord, have helped me and comforted me.
Thank you both. So Hagar's story is a complicated one that we might not know what to do with. Because when we read other stories from ancient times, like the ancient Greek epics and myths and tales from other ancient civilizations, we can understand that they come from a very different context to ours. Their world is one laden with incest, slavery, sexual violence, women as property, and many other things that we identify rightly as evils today. But when we find that stuff in the Bible, it can be really hard to reconcile because you might want to have that stuff be part of God's story. And obviously we've read a small part of Hagar's story today, but her story as a whole and her place in Abraham's household goes something a little bit like this. So Abraham, as he was called at the time, and his wife Sarai moved to Egypt to get away from a famine. When they left Egypt, he was very rich. He had lots of gold and silver, lots of servants and slaves, and lots of cattle. So when we talk about household in the ancient context, we're not talking about like a nuclear family, like one mum, one dad, and 2.5 kids. It was basically like being king of a small village. In another part of Genesis, some years later, the text tells us that when he goes to rescue Lot from captivity, his house includes at least 318 trained men who were born in his house. So, say house. Picture a village, basically, like that he's in charge of. So God promises him not only a land, but also numerous descendants. And this is where we get our first mention of Hagar, where Sarai, who has never been able to bear a child, says, well, I've got this slave, so take her as a wife, and then I get to be a mother through her. And so he does. Hagar becomes his wife, a second wife, and once she's pregnant, she looks on her mistress with contempt, which Sarai takes issue with. But Abraham holds his hands up and he's like, look, she's your slave, so, do what you want with her, it's not my problem. So Sarai deals with her very harshly, we're told, and Hagar runs away into the desert. An angel meets her in the desert by a spring of water and tells her to return to her mistress and to submit to Sarai. God promises Hagar that God will multiply her offspring. And also included in that prophecy promise is that her son will be called Ishmael because God has listened to her suffering, and that he will live at odds with all of his kin. And here Hagar names God El Roi, likely meaning God who sees or God of seeing. And she's absolutely astonished that she's encountered God and survived. God then promises Abraham, they come into this new covenant together. He gets renamed Abraham, Sarai gets a new name, Sarah. And God promises again, you're going to be the father of a great nation. And so Abraham's like, right, yeah, so Ishmael, right? Because, Sarah's getting on a bit. She's like 99, she's never had kids. She's a bit past her time, so it's Ishmael, right? And God replies, look, I hear you, and I will bless him as well because he's also your son, but no, I want you to have a child with Sarah, and you're going to call him Isaac. And then Abraham, through the act of circumcision, brings Ishmael, Hagar's son, along with all the male members of his household, into that covenant that he has with God. And now that's when we come to today's reading, where we skip a bunch of years. Ishmael is now a teenager, and Sarah has finally had a child, Isaac. And when she sees that teenage Ishmael playing with Isaac, she tells Abraham to cast him out because she doesn't want him to inherit what belongs to her son, Isaac. And Abraham's distressed about this, but God, kind of echoing what Abraham did earlier on, goes, you do whatever Sarah wants. So Sarah wants her cast out, so he gives Hagar and Ishmael bread and water and sends them out to wander the desert. And she can't bear to watch her son die of starvation, so she abandons him and cries out to God, who once again meets her in the desert, looks after them both, and Ishmael gets to grow up to be a very strong lad with a bow, and he gets himself an Egyptian wife. And that's the total sum of Hagar's story in Genesis. That's all that we know about her. And it's a story backdropped by a lot of stuff that is difficult to read. The obvious issue of Hagar being enslaved, not having a choice about procreating with Abraham, being given away like cattle at Sarah's suggestion. And many of the stories that are found in Genesis would have been oral histories before they were committed to text. And a lot of them were passed down to explain the origins of people. this is our lineage, this is where we came from, this is the story of us. And they also have, this is the story of other people. So in Genesis 19, we learn that apparently the Moabites are all descended from Lot's first daughter, and the Ammonites are all descended from Lot's second daughter, both of whom got their father drunk and had sex with him so that they could have children after they left Sodom and Gomorrah. And the subtext there is clear. It's these other tribes, these other people that we hate, or that we're at war with, or we don't like, or they're a bit weird. Well, they've got a really shameful history. Where they come from is not honourable. It's quite a common thought throughout most of the Abrahamic religious traditions that while Isaac's descendants became the 12 tribes of Judah, and then later the ancient people of Israel, the current Jewish people, Ishmael's descendants became the Arab nations and the Arab world. Although Islamic tradition asserts that Hagar was not enslaved and that she was Abraham's legitimate second wife. So I wonder what the story might be trying to tell us about the origin of various peoples. Paul in the letter to the Galatians asserts his own interpretation of what this story means. He says that Hagar represents the law that binds and enslaves, and her offspring are born to bondage and they represent Jerusalem. And that Sarah represents the new covenant that they get, that this new emerging church has with Christ. And Sarah's descendants are the children of promise. Here's what I see in Hagar, between pieces of the story in this ancient world that are quite difficult to swallow. I see a God who honours people's decisions, even their mistakes, even when it's not what God wants. And a God who blesses and protects us, even when it doesn't look like what we thought it would. What God wants in this story is for Abraham to bear a son through his wife Sarah. And Abraham doesn't do that. He does it with Hagar instead. But God doesn't curse him. God doesn't turn Ishmael away. In fact, God actively says, look, this isn't what I wanted, but here's your son, so I'm still going to bless him. He's going to father a different nation. But I want you to have a son with Sarah. I don't believe God wants Hagar to be cast out. But God honours our free will to make choices, even terrible ones. God might not cause Hagar suffering here, but God can still bless us in our suffering. God can still be good to us, even when we feel like everything is falling apart. And when humans fail and mistreat us, that doesn't mean that God has abandoned us. Hagar in this story, she's put in a position she didn't ask for. She's enslaved. She doesn't have any choice about procreating with Abraham. But in a world in which, the world in which this story happens is one where infertility is normally interpreted as a sign of God's disfavour with someone. And in that world, she not only has a son, but she also produces an heir, which is about the only power that a woman could actually grasp in that world. And when all of that falls apart, and she's treated so badly by Sarah that she runs into the desert, God hears her cries. And when she returns and her son is allowed to grow up in Abraham's household, is made a part of that covenant with God, along with all of the other people in the house. I wonder, did she think that Ishmael was going to be Abraham's inheritor, and he was going to become the patriarch of that house? It seems to be what Abraham and Sarah think. If that's what she thought was going to happen when she went back the first time, then that dream was cruelly ripped away from her when Sarah drove her out a second time. What must she have been thinking as she wandered the desert a second time in today's passage? so distraught that she abandons her child because she can't bear to watch him die. I imagine she was feeling betrayed, not just by Sarah and Abraham, but also by God. God heard her in the desert when Ishmael was a baby and assured her that he would father a nation, and now he's here and he's going to die of thirst in the desert. She lost everything twice. And it must feel really cruel to have trusted God, to have gone back to Abraham and Sarah, the place where she was running away from because she was treated so badly. And then to have things feel like they're looking up. She had over a decade in that house after she went back, where things were a lot better, where it looked like Ishmael was going to inherit everything. And then she has it ripped away from her again. I think so many of the stories that we treasure, both in and out of the Bible, they tend to have like quite a simple trajectory. A person will lose something, or they'll go through a tragedy, and they sort of go downhill. And they're hurting, or they're betrayed, and then the narrative will start on the up again because they get their redemption, or they get what they deserve. But not this story. Not now, because Hagar's in the desert again. Because life isn't one simple trajectory like that. It's not one story of suffering and then redemption and healing. Life is a cycle of death and resurrection that happens over and over and over again. I can't speak for other people, but I know that in my life there's been many times where I have felt like I've found my faith again, or I feel as though like I've figured out what God's doing in my life, or I finally feel sure of where things are going, only for it to get ripped away again by some new circumstance. And I find myself right back in the desert. But God doesn't abandon us to the cruelty of others, or to the circumstances of our lives. God was with Hagar the first time that she wandered in the desert, and God was with her again the second time. And I know if she'd been forced out a third, fourth, fifth time, God would have been with her then as well. Because that's who God is. A God who blesses us and cares for us and never abandons us. Even if our world might not look like we thought it would. Even if we've been mistreated by other people, God remains steadfast. So I wonder what deserts we might find ourselves in, like Hagar, where we've been before, feeling like we've gone back to square one. Can we believe that God is still going to bless us? That God keeps God's promises? That God isn't going to abandon us? So we've got some discussion questions that we're going to move to now. I think we're probably 3 groups. So we'll have one group at the back there by Nikki, one group down the front, and one group out the back in the foyer. We've got about 20 minutes. We'll try and be back for 10 past 8. Feel free to sit with whichever group takes your fancy. You don't have to talk. We're not going to extract your opinions from you, but you're very welcome to use these questions as a starting point for your discussions. So firstly, do you find it difficult to read stories in the Bible with norms and values that we consider atrocities today? How do you make sense of these stories and the God that you know? Secondly, what stories might we be telling about other people to justify our fear or